The click of the Evergreen Grand Hotel lobby door echoed like an invisible slap, all eyes turning toward Charlotte Evans the moment she stepped inside. Her simple navy blue suit, slightly worn leather shoes, and elegant handbag resting casually by her side were understated. Yet it was her calm composure and unwavering presence that made the entire lobby seem to hold its breath. Charlotte, 42 years old, CEO of a multinational hotel group, required no entourage, no attention, only her own observation, assessing her property firsthand. Behind the reception desk, Rebecca Hale, 25, a new employee with a messy bun, typed away, as if Charlotte were an invisible stranger, unworthy of even a glance or a greeting. Kevin Scott, 28. The assistant receptionist stood behind his eyes, flickering with doubt, his heartbeat quickening unease creeping through every movement. A few guests in the lobby glanced at each other, phones already drawn, recording live streaming. The atmosphere was taut, each of Charlotte's steps resonating across the marble floor, bouncing from the high ceiling, reflecting off crystal chandeliers, each step a challenge to every assumption. She stopped at the desk, her voice calm but sharp. "I would like to check into the VIP room tonight. My name is Charlotte Evans." Rebecca tilted her lips in a faint smirk, her voice airy. "We have no available rooms, only confirmed guests." A soft laugh drifted from the staff behind her, contempt clear. Kevin's eyes darted nervously, panic beginning to surface. Charlotte did not move, observing every action, every glance, every breath, noting every detail for the next step. Phones across the lobby turned the scene into a live stage, each eye watching every gesture recorded. Charlotte lightly opened her bag, her hand touching the black credit card, a symbol of power and prestige, alongside her official ID. Rebecca froze, hands trembling as she held the reservation book. Kevin looked up, recognition dawning, heart-racing sweat forming on his brow. Charlotte remained composed, every breath steady her gaze, unshakable, cataloguing every detail at the reception desk on Rebecca's face, in Kevin's movements, all mapped in her mind like a strategic blueprint. Guests began whispering curiosity mixed with awe. The narrative slowed every detail in the lobby, vivid light reflecting through glassware, the faint scent of fresh flowers, the subtle background music heightening tension. Charlotte's mind absorbed every emotion, her own serene confidence, the staff's anxiety and mounting panic, the guests' curiosity and apprehension, all coalescing into a dramatic moment, the space seemingly shrinking around her. She placed her credit card on the counter, her voice steady and deep, each word deliberate, awakening the staff's consciousness. "I am the owner of this group. I own this hotel." Everything exploded in the minds of Rebecca and Kevin, sweat-trickling eyes widening, realizing the enormity of their mistake. Charlotte needed no yelling, no threats, simply standing there with calm authority, every detail, from gestures to eye contact to breath, sending an undeniable message. True power lies in preparation, intelligence observation, and decisive action. The Evergreen Grand lobby fell into a breathless silence, all attention on Charlotte, every eye fixed on her movements, every heartbeat seemingly paused. She scanned the room quietly, not only observing the staff, but sensing every reaction of the guests, astonishment, curiosity, quiet admiration. All emotions converged on her. The pace quickened as Charlotte locked eyes with Rebecca, each detail and discriminatory behavior exposed. She spoke little, but her gaze and demeanor were enough to make those who had once wielded authority hesitate. Guests began pulling out phones, live streaming sharing, immediately creating undeniable public pressure. In that moment, everything became clear: prejudice, arrogance, and error laid bare. Charlotte had entered the lobby not just to monitor service, but to confront assumptions, turning a discriminatory experience into a lesson on fairness and authority, demonstrating that true power rests in intellect, strategy, and courage, not in shouting or false dominance. The evergreen grand lobby became a focal point where all eyes followed, all hearts felt all emotions stretched to their peak, unfolding a story that would later be remembered as a living testament to fairness, patience, and unmatched leadership strategy. The silence lasted only a few seconds before Rebecca Hale, 25, bit her lip, trying to regain control, her voice a mix of fear and pride. I will need confirmation from the senior manager," she said, hands trembling as they hovered over the keyboard, eyes darting to Charlotte as if searching for justification for her own misconduct. Kevin Scott, 28, the assistant receptionist standing behind, felt the shift in power he had never experienced before, silently observing, trying to stay composed as every eye in the lobby focused on Charlotte. A few guests near the desk raised their phones, screens casting reflections on tense faces, comments and live stream shares, climbing every second, creating an invisible pressure that compressed the lobby, each breath and heartbeat palpable. Charlotte did not move, only stepped slightly forward, her gaze fixed on Rebecca, eyes deep and sharp, every gesture an unspoken message. Every act of discrimination will have consequences. She lightly placed her ID and black credit card on the counter, the light reflecting off the metal, emphasizing the authority she wielded. Rebecca gaped. Kevin held his breath, the lobby frozen, as if time itself had slowed, leaving only the sound of heartbeats and Rebecca's jittering keystrokes. Charlotte spoke in a calm, resonant tone, each word deliberate. "I am the owner of the group. I own this entire hotel." Every gaze from the front desk staff to curious guests was drawn to Charlotte, centered on an unassailable point of power, every prejudice and pretense stripped bare in that instant. Kevin stepped back, hands touching the desk lightly, a weight pressing down on him, realizing that every previous decision, every misjudgment by Rebecca would now be exposed. Guests whispered, eyes wide with astonishment, some beginning to live stream, amplifying public pressure, leaving staff no anonymity, every misstep recorded clearly. Charlotte stood there, composed, every breath, every glance, every movement carefully calculated and observed, knowing this was not just a service check, but a demonstration of intellectual authority, strategy, and flawless preparation. Rebecca tried to speak again, voice trembling. You cannot. We need confirmation from the regional CEO, but her words faltered. Even Kevin dared not intervene. Charlotte stepped forward, her cold eyes sweeping the reception, reading every gesture, glance and breath of Rebecca and Kevin, knowing any resistance or justification was meaningless. A young guest at the back pulled out a phone, red recording light, blinking, starting a live stream, the sound of rapid breathing, quick typing, and cautious footsteps from other guests, heightening the tension, the narrative accelerating each gesture a climax. Charlotte lifted her lips in a faint smirk, needing no words, her gaze alone, commanding authority, making Rebecca step back. Kevin frozen as if petrified, the entire lobby pausing to witness. One guest whispered, She owns this hotel." The word spread like wildfire, each person realizing the truth and sharing instantly live streams, surging into tens of thousands of views. Charlotte spoke, voice firm. Every act of discrimination, every disrespect toward a guest will be handled according to policy. Each word struck like a hammer against the ego and prejudice of the staff. Rebecca swallowed, eyes wide, body trembling, realizing her mistake could not be undone in an instant. Kevin clenched his hands, a mix of fear and admiration, understanding that true power does not lie in position or shouting, but in preparation, intelligence, and meticulous observation, all perfectly demonstrated by Charlotte from the moment she stepped into the lobby. Charlotte looked around, noticing guests rising, pulling out phones, observing and sharing the communal pressure filling the space staff, caught in a public whirlwind with no escape. She lightly retrieved her phone, recording the entire scene, every gesture, every word of Rebecca Kevin, and even the quietly observing guests. The narrative slowed as Charlotte observed the fearful eyes, the trembling breaths, then accelerated as each action, each movement of the staff was exposed to the online community, the tension spreading throughout the space. Charlotte stood silently, gaze sharp but resolute hands resting on her ID and credit card, everyone sensing absolute power. In that moment, the Evergreen Grand ceased to be merely a luxury hotel and became a battleground of intellectual authority, fairness and justice. Every staff member's gaze faltered, every defensive gesture and justification rendered meaningless. Charlotte only needed a subtle step, a direct look, and everything was clear. She was not merely a guest. She was the supreme authority, and every act of discrimination or wrongdoing would be held accountable. The lobby echoed with exhalations, phones flashing live streams, spiking guests murmuring the weight of communal pressure closing in on the staff with no way out. Charlotte Evans, with steady breaths, a cold, unwavering gaze, had transformed the lobby into a living testament to fairness, intelligence, and true power, creating a story that would be remembered forever. Power does not need shouting. It does not need force. It only requires preparation, observation, and action at the right moment. Charlotte Evans stood frozen at the front desk, her eyes sweeping the Evergreen Grand lobby, feeling every heavy breath, every stunned gaze from guests and staff, every trembling exhale from Rebecca Hale, echoing like a drumbeat signaling a climax. Kevin Scott's heart raced, hands trembling as they brushed the desk. Yet Charlotte remained calm, utterly composed, each breath measured, observing, while preparing for her next move. She slowly drew out her phone, recording the entire scene, the screen's light reflecting across the employees' faces, highlighting every nuance of panic, fear, and prejudice, every minute detail captured as indisputable evidence. Guests around began stirring phones, raised live streams, surging rapid keystrokes, whispered comments, wide-eyed astonishment, creating an unrelenting public pressure that turned the lobby into a stage for authority and justice. Charlotte placed her ID and black credit card on the counter, the chandelier light glinting off every letter and edge, revealing the ultimate power she possessed. Rebecca and Kevin stepped back, bodies trembling, voices catching eyes wide, realizing the enormity of the mistake they had just made. The entire lobby fell silent, each breath heavy, each glance frozen in the air. Charlotte spoke in a deep, resonant voice, each syllable clear and forceful, every word hammering against the staff's arrogance and prejudice. Every act of discrimination, every disrespect toward a guest will be addressed immediately. The narration slowed to emphasize each feeling, each reaction, each trembling breath, then accelerated as Charlotte's gaze swept the lobby. Every movement of the staff read every guest reaction, noted live streams and shares surging, generating overwhelming public pressure, leaving the staff disoriented, with no excuse or escape. A young guest, Emily Parker, raised her phone, the red recording light blinking, whispering, "She is the owner of this hotel." And in an instant, everyone's perception of power and prejudice was overturned. Charlotte gently lifted her hand, eyes locking onto Rebecca, and Kevin gaze icy yet calm authority radiating, making Rebecca shrink back. Kevin frozen, the lobby seemingly paused to witness intellect prevailing over arrogance and bias. She moved deliberately, opening her handbag, each action calculated, reading every movement, every glance, every anxious heartbeat around her. The pace accelerated as Charlotte issued her first requests transaction, verification document checks, all materials scrutinized, every staff action, exposed live streams, exploding virtual audience comments, flooding in. Is this really the CEO? Incredible watch how she handles this. And the guests' gasps and murmurs, blending with phone lights, created an atmosphere of extreme tension. Charlotte remained composed, voice steady, yet sharp, each word awakening the staff's reason. Everything will be handled according to policy, no exceptions. Every defensive gesture, every justification from Rebecca and Kevin was meaningless. Heart rates rising, sweat beading on foreheads, bodies trembling. The lobby transformed into an arena where mistakes and prejudice were exposed publicly. Charlotte nodded slightly to the guests, calm eyes, yet internally cataloguing every detail, every gesture for her next steps in personnel management and system improvement. Another middle-aged guest quietly raised her phone, live streaming, commenting, "She is so calm yet exudes absolute authority," intensifying pressure on the staff. Charlotte spoke little, but her gaze, presence and movements made the employees fully realize the gravity of their mistake. Kevin stepped back, further, voice trembling, "Why, you are," but could not finish. Rebecca, fumbling hands, shaking on the keyboard, eyes wide, the lobby frozen in a moment of ultimate tension. Charlotte remained calm, breathing steadily, movements, sharp gaze, sweeping the reception, conveying the true power lies in intelligence, preparation, and meticulous observation, without shouting or violence. Each breath exerted pressure, every guest's glance, every live stream functioned as instruments, amplifying public scrutiny. Every comment and share, leaving the staff disoriented, with no avenue for excuse. Charlotte gently lifted her ID and black credit card light, reflecting through the crystal, highlighting the supreme authority she held. Rebecca trembling, Kevin stunned guests, astonished live streams, spiking chaos contained entirely within Charlotte's control. She slowly raised her phone, capturing every detail, creating perfect evidence. The narration slowed to emphasize each shock, each trembling breath, each astonished gaze, then accelerated as every movement was revealed. Live streams surged, comments numbered in the tens of thousands, guests sharing public pressure, spreading staff completely losing control. Charlotte Evans' calm, icy gaze, resolute, transformed the evergreen grand lobby into a living testament to intellectual authority, fairness, and true power, creating a story that would be remembered forever. Power does not need shouting, does not require violence. It only demands preparation, observation, recording, and action at the right moment. The pressure in the evergreen grand lobby surged, every breath, every glance, from guests and staff, pulled into an invisible vortex where every decision was under Charlotte Evans' control. Rebecca Hale, 25, and Kevin Scott, 28, stood frozen hands, trembling, sweat beading on their foreheads, realizing that every excuse, every defensive action was now meaningless. They had just made the gravest mistake of their careers. Charlotte calmly drew her phone, recording the entire scene, the screen's light reflecting across Rebecca's panicked face, every detail captured as living evidence of authority and fairness. Live streams exploded, comments flooded from all directions. She is the CIO, incredible watch, how she handles this. The staff's trembling breaths, the click of keyboards, the flashing of phone lights created a tense soundtrack, the narration slowing to highlight each feeling of panic, each chaotic thought racing through Rebecca and Kevin. Yet Charlotte remained perfectly composed, icy eyes sweeping the reception, every gesture and reaction meticulously observed and calculated like a strategic game. She placed her ID and black credit card on the counter light, reflecting through the crystal chandeliers, emphasizing the supreme authority she wielded, voice steady and sharp. Every act of discrimination, every instance of disrespect toward a guest will be handled according to policy. The pace accelerated as every action of the staff was exposed, live streams continuing to surge public pressure like a powerful wave, pulling them into an inescapable whirlwind. Rebecca, trembling eyes wide. Kevin stunned guests, astonished everything entirely under Charlotte's control. She stepped forward, gaze-piercing, commanding presence, making the staff recognize the serious error they had just committed. Heart rates racing, bodies shaking, sweat-dripping voices caught in throats. Guests began whispering, eyes sparkling with amazement and admiration, some raising phones to live stream directly, comments pouring in. So calm, yet so authoritative. Is she really the CEO? Unbelievable. The narration slowed as Charlotte observed every gaze, every reaction, each gesture remembered, then quickened as she began the next step, preparing to discipline staff and overhaul the entire system. A subtle step from Charlotte, a direct look made Rebecca and Kevin completely shake, with no way to justify or escape the consequences. She raised her phone, calling the regional CEO, voice calm, yet commanding only a few words, authority radiating through the lobby, every eye drawn to the phone, every thought of the staff halted. Each passing minute heightened the public pressure. Guests' curious and astonished glances, heavy breaths, all forming a peak of tension. Charlotte needed no shouting, no force. Calm composure and piercing authority alone controlled the entire situation. Rebecca tried to speak, but before words escaped, live streamers and guests focused on her every action recorded. Kevin stepped back, trembling fear mixed with awe, realizing true power does not lie in shouting position or false authority, but in intelligence preparation and meticulous observation, perfectly demonstrated by Charlotte from her first step into the lobby. A young guest drew out a phone, red recording light blinking, live streaming, live whispered commentary pressure surging like a cyclone, drawing every wrongful act of the staff into an inescapable spiral. Charlotte stepped another step, icy gaze sweeping the reception, every gesture, every reaction, every heartbeat of Rebecca and Kevin read completely, all mistakes exposed clearly. She placed her hand on her ID and black credit card light, reflecting through the crystal's authority overflowing, creating undeniable pressure. The pace accelerated as Charlotte recorded everything, every minute detail, from guests' astonished eyes to the staff's flustered reactions, live streams, erupting comments and shares, flooding in from everywhere. She is the CEO, incredible watch how she handles this. Everything seemed frozen, the entire lobby transformed into a living arena, proving authority, fairness, and intellect. Charlotte looked around, noticing guests rising, taking out phones, watching and sharing public pressure. Surging staff completely losing control. Rebecca trembling. Kevin stunned, every quivering breath. Every tense movement felt like a taut string. Charlotte remained calm. Every gesture perfectly calculated, preparing for the next step, terminating the staff at fault, implementing a full system overhaul. The narration slowed as Charlotte observed terrified eyes, every detail, every reaction recorded, then sped up as she executed disciplinary measures, live streams, surging comments, pouring in, guests sharing public pressure, spreading across the lobby, staff fully disoriented, with no escape. Charlotte Evans' perfectly calm, icy gaze, commanding presence had transformed the Evergreen Grand Lobby into a living testament to intellectual authority, fairness and true power, where every mistake, every prejudice was exposed, creating a story that would be remembered forever. Power does not need shouting, does not require force. It only demands preparation, observation, recording, and action at the right moment. Charlotte Evans stood at the center of the Evergreen Grand Lobby, her piercing gaze sweeping across the reception area, where Rebecca Hale and Kevin Scott stood trembling bodies, frozen sweat beading on their foreheads, heartbeats pounding like drums, signaling impending consequences. Charlotte raised her phone and called the regional CEO, her voice calm, yet authoritative, each word resonating in their minds. Every act of racial discrimination, every disrespect toward a guest would be addressed immediately, and all penalties would be carried out publicly. The narration slowed as Charlotte's eyes scanned the guests live streaming, observing every minute detail, every curious glance, every finger trembling over a record button, but then accelerated as she stepped closer to the desk, placing her ID and black credit card on the counter light, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers, making her supreme authority undeniable. Guests began whispering, eyes wide with astonishment, some raising phones to live stream comments pouring in. She is the CEO, incredible watch how she handles this. Every trembling breath, every frightened glance from Rebecca and Kevin, every sigh from the guests merged into a peak of tension, public pressure inescapable, pulling every wrongful act into a vortex with no escape. Charlotte moved step by step, calm, icy gaze, commanding presence, needing no shouting, no violence, yet making the staff fully aware of the gravity of their mistake. She looked directly at Rebecca, her voice calm yet sharp. Rebecca Hale. Your performance has violated customer service standards. Prejudice and discrimination are unacceptable. You are hereby relieved of your duties at Evergreen Grand immediately. Rebecca gaped, trembling, unable to speak. Kevin stiffened, heart-racing eyes wide, realizing that all previous excuses were meaningless, every mistake exposed under public scrutiny. Charlotte continued, eyes scanning the lobby, every gesture, every movement noted, every defensive action, every evasive word from Kevin rendered useless. Kevin Scott, your performance will also be reviewed. You will participate in retraining on service culture and anti-bias protocols. Any further violations will result in immediate termination. The narration slowed to emphasize the staff's trembling panic and helplessness, then accelerated as Charlotte pointed toward the guests and live stream cameras, every staff action recorded, live streams, surging comments flooding in, the public pressure sweeping through the lobby, staff completely disoriented with no escape. Charlotte lightly raised her phone, recording the entire scene. Red recording, light blinking, creating living evidence of every wrongful act and sending a powerful message. True authority does not require shouting or violence, only preparation, observation, and decisive action. She silently retrieved the prepared files from her bag, every legal document, every employee record placed on the counter. Light reflecting off the crystal's signatures and seals, clearly visible authority undeniable. All eyes on Charlotte, sensing her complete control, public pressure leaving the staff trembling. Charlotte continued, "All acts of discrimination at Evergreen Grand will be handled according to corporate policy. I will directly oversee the overhaul. All employees will undergo mandatory service culture training, periodic audits, and a monthly mystery guest program. Any violations will be recorded and addressed immediately." Each word struck like a hammer against the staff's pride, prejudice, and arrogance narration, accelerating as every action was exposed to guests, live streams, comments and shares, the lobby seeming to shrink under the weight of collective scrutiny. Rebecca trembled. Kevin froze, sweat running down their foreheads, eyes wide, bodies taut like strings, no escape. Charlotte silently nodded to the guests, calm yet commanding, noting every detail, emphasizing her absolute authority. Guests continued live streaming, commenting, sharing, public pressure radiating throughout the lobby, every staff gesture observed and evaluated. Charlotte gently returned the documents to her bag, icy gaze sweeping the lobby, every detail and movement recorded for the next step, a full system overhaul and supervision of all branches. The narration slowed to emphasize staff trembling panic and helplessness, then accelerated as Charlotte issued the command, "All employees directly involved will be terminated immediately. Remaining staff will undergo mandatory service and anti-bias training. Any future violations will be strictly handled." Every word, every action, every gesture was recorded. Live streams surged. Comments flooded in public pressure, overwhelming Rebecca and Kevin, frozen sweat, dripping heart-racing bodies, tense like strings. Charlotte Evans, breathing steadily, eyes icy presence. Commanding had transformed the Evergreen Grand lobby into a living testament to intellectual authority, measured power and fairness, where every prejudice and error was exposed, marking a decisive turning point in the complete system overhaul, creating a powerful ripple effect across the hospitality industry, inspiring guests, employees, and witnesses that true authority lies in preparation, observation, recording, and decisive action. The moment the termination orders were issued, the Evergreen Grand lobby seemed to explode, every gasp, every astonished glance from guests, every click of a phone live stream, forming an unprecedented media whirlwind. Social media comments on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter poured in hashtags Evergreen Justice, Hotel While Black, and CEO Power, trending instantly, thousands of viewers following every moment as Charlotte Evans confronted the front desk staff, capturing Rebecca Hale and Kevin Scott trembling, and the shocked eyes of other managers, amplifying public pressure to an unstoppable force, turning the hotel lobby into a live arena of power, justice, and exposure of prejudice. Charlotte stood tall, every movement measured, icy eyes sweeping the room, hand firmly on her ID and black credit card light, reflecting through the crystal, her authority undeniable. The narration slowed to emphasize each trembling reaction of the staff, each astonished glance of the guests, but accelerated immediately as Charlotte activated her phone, live streaming the entire scene. Every movement, every word, every glance of the staff and guests recorded comments and shares, soaring by the second, spreading across social media, creating a domino effect no one could control, from the guests in the lobby to viewers hundreds of kilometers away. Public pressure, unrelenting, pulling Rebecca and Kevin into a vortex, bodies tense, hearts pounding, eyes wide, sweat beading. Charlotte needed no shouting, no force, only calm and evident authority, enough to make everyone recognize their grave error, and that true power lies in intelligence observation and decisive action. Guests around began raising phones, live streaming, sharing comments, flooding in. She is the CEO, unbelievable watch, how she handles this. Admiration and astonishment rippled like a storm, public pressure, completely overwhelming, the staff leaving them entirely out of control. Charlotte lifted her hand, a subtle gesture, silencing everyone, every trembling breath, every anxious gaze fixed on her, each guest live streaming acting as a direct witness. The narration accelerated as Charlotte began announcing systemic reforms. All staff would undergo mandatory service and anti-bias training. A monthly mystery guest program would be implemented, all violations recorded, and strictly addressed, public pressure radiating throughout the lobby, guests acting as a living monitoring system. Live streamers capturing every detail, comments flooding in every second. Rebecca, trembling. Kevin, frozen, astonished bodies, taut like strings, every movement, every word, every gesture exposed. Charlotte remained calm, deliberate, authoritative narration, slowing as her eyes met each guest, each phone live stream, each surging comment, then accelerating as she retrieved files from her bag, legal documents, and employee records laid across the counter. Light reflecting clearly on signatures, seals, and verification of authority, all forming living evidence of power, fairness, and flawless preparation. Guests continued live streaming, commenting, sharing public pressure, rendering every defensive move or excuse from Rebecca and Kevin meaningless each step. Each gesture exposed heartbeats, racing sweat, beading eyes wide with shock and fear. Charlotte Evans' calm, icy gaze, authoritative presence, transformed the evergreen grand lobby into a living testament to intellectual authority, fairness and justice, where every error and prejudice was publicly exposed, live streams, exploding comments, flooding public scrutiny, extending beyond the hotel, creating a viral story across the hospitality industry, inspiring guests, staff, and witnesses that true power lies in preparation, observation, recording, and decisive action at the right moment. Charlotte Evans stood at the center of the Evergreen Grand lobby, hand still resting on her ID and black credit card, her icy gaze sweeping across the reception area, recording every detail, Rebecca Hale's terrified eyes, Kevin Scott's trembling body, the guests live streaming and recording the relentless flood of comments from social media, all creating undeniable public pressure. Charlotte calmly retrieved files from her bag, spreading each legal document and employee report across the counter, the chandelier light reflecting off every seal signature and authorization, highlighting her absolute authority. The narration slowed to emphasize the trembling panic and helplessness of the staff, then accelerated as Charlotte announced the full systemic overhaul. Every employee at Evergreen Grand would undergo mandatory training on service culture, anti-bias awareness, and handling diverse guests. Any act of discrimination, prejudice, or disrespect would be recorded and addressed strictly. All management and staff would participate in regular evaluations, and the monthly mystery guest program would assess service attitude and quality, all reports directly supervised by Charlotte, with live streams and recorded footage used as training material and proof of authority. Public scrutiny amplified, leaving staff and managers disoriented, hearts, racing bodies, taut, sweat, beading eyes wide, unable to justify their actions. Charlotte continued, icy gaze, unwavering voice, steady but authoritative, each word emphasizing legal and ethical authority. I will not tolerate any act of discrimination or disrespect toward guests. Every violation will be addressed immediately, and all staff must comply with the new procedures to ensure absolute fairness. The narration slowed to highlight every anxious glance, every tremor, every shocked gaze, then accelerated as Charlotte stepped to the counter, placing each document and employee file strategically light, reflecting through the crystals, making every detail of power and authority visible. Live streamers and guests recorded everything, comments pouring in, public pressure, rendering every defensive action or excuse from Rebecca and Kevin meaningless. Charlotte lightly raised her phone, recording every gesture, glance, and word of Rebecca and Kevin live streams, surging comments and shares, skyrocketing public pressure, overwhelming, leaving Rebecca trembling, Kevin frozen, astonished, bodies, taut hearts, racing eyes wide. Charlotte needed no shouting, no violence. Calm composure, authoritative presence, and piercing gaze were sufficient to control the situation, showcasing intellectual authority, exposing every bias and mistake. She announced precise protocols. All staff must complete unconscious bias training. Within 90 days, participate in monthly mystery guest evaluations. All unusual reports supervised directly by Charlotte. Public pressure from guests and social media serving as a control mechanism, ensuring all violations would be addressed. The narration slowed to highlight each reaction, each astonished gaze, then accelerated as Charlotte issued the orders. Any staff directly involved would be terminated, immediately remaining staff under strict supervision, mandatory training, enforced all future violations, handled firmly public pressure from live streams, comments and shares, surging, the lobby vibrating with attention, every guest acting as a live witness. Rebecca and Kevin completely lost control, trembling eyes, wide bodies, taut, every defensive move futile. Charlotte remained calm, every gesture perfectly calculated, preparing for the next step, implementing a full overhaul of Evergreen Grand and supervising other branches, eliminating all misconduct and prejudice. Her intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, public scrutiny radiating beyond the hotel social media, a buzz, live streams, exploding comments flooding in, guests sharing, overwhelming pressure, spreading, making everyone recognize the true power lies in preparation, observation, recording, and decisive action. Charlotte stood tall, hand on the files, icy gaze commanding presence, every detail and gesture remembered for executing the full system overhaul narration, slowing to emphasize staff, trembling and panic, then accelerating as Charlotte announced new policies, comprehensive training, periodic evaluations, direct supervision, monthly mystery guest program, public pressure from guests and social media, all forming a mechanism ensuring absolute fairness. Evergreen Grand became a symbol of intellectual authority, fairness, and systemic change in the hospitality industry. The story going viral, inspiring all who witnessed that true power does not rely on shouting or false authority, but on intelligence, preparation, observation, recording, and acting at the right moment. Once Charlotte Evans implemented the systemic reforms, the Evergreen Grand lobby was filled with an extraordinary energy. Every breath, every glance, from guests and staff, drawn into a vortex of fairness and intellectual authority. Live streamers and guests recorded continuously comments, flooding in, hashtags, Evergreen Justice, Hotel While Black, and CEO Power, quickly trending, amplifying public scrutiny, exposing every gesture, every glance of Rebecca Hale and Kevin Scott, each trembling word and awkward movement rendered meaningless hearts, racing bodies, taut sweat beading on foreheads as they realized all bias and misconduct was now publicly observed. Charlotte remained calm, icy gaze, sweeping the lobby, hand firmly on the files, noting every subtle movement, every glance from staff, every reaction of guests and live streamers. The narration slowed to emphasize each feeling of panic, each astonished gaze, then accelerated as Charlotte announced the new system. All employees must complete mandatory training on service culture and anti-bias awareness within 90 days, participate in regular evaluations, and the monthly mystery guest program, all violations recorded and addressed strictly with public scrutiny, from guests' live streams and comments, acting as a living oversight mechanism, ensuring all misconduct and prejudice would be eliminated. Guests continued filming live streamers, updating every detail, comments surging public pressure, spreading, creating a domino effect. Every employee and manager in the lobby disoriented, trembling eyes wide with shock, bodies taut, sweat dripping. Realizing true power does not lie in shouting or false authority, but in intelligence preparation and meticulous observation. Charlotte moved deliberately, calm, authoritative presence, evident every gesture, perfectly calculated narration, accelerating as she oversaw the entire system, reviewing records, legal documents, employee reports, crystal light reflecting signatures, seals and authorization, creating undeniable pressure. The narration slowed to capture each astonished glance, each trembling action of guests, then accelerated as she implemented mandatory training and periodic evaluations. All violations recorded, public pressure from live streams, and comments surging the lobby, vibrating with scrutiny. Every wrongful act exposed Charlotte's intellectual authority and fairness, demonstrated vividly. The narration slowed again as Charlotte observed all guest reactions, every astonished gaze, every live stream comment, then accelerated as she announced specific policies. All employees to undergo unconscious bias, training, periodic evaluations, direct supervision, implementation of the monthly mystery guest program, public scrutiny from guests and social media, ensuring all violations are strictly addressed. Rebecca trembled. Kevin frozen bodies taut like strings. Every defensive move futile. Charlotte remained calm, every step and gesture calculated to implement a complete overhaul of Evergreen Grand and supervise other branches, eliminating all misconduct and bias. Her intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, public pressure spreading beyond the hotel social media, buzzing live streams, surging comments flooding in, guests sharing, all creating a mechanism, ensuring absolute fairness. The narration slowed to emphasize staff trembling and panic, then accelerated as Charlotte executed the next step, immediate termination of directly violating staff, suspension of other managers, mandatory comprehensive retraining, all bias and misconduct removed, intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly. The hotel lobby became a symbol of fairness, measured authority, and systemic change in the hospitality industry. The story spreading widely, inspiring all witnesses that true power does not reside in shouting or false authority, but in intelligence, preparation, observation, recording, and timely action. Charlotte Evans stood tall, icy gaze, commanding presence, every detail and gesture, perfectly calculated narration, slowing to emphasize the power of public scrutiny and intellectual authority, then accelerating as live streamers and guests continuously shared and commented, the lobby resonating with each pulse. Charlotte's authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, creating a ripple effect across the community hospitality industry, and social media, becoming a viral story, inspiring others that one person with vision, principle, and preparation can transform an entire system, establish new standards, and generate lasting influence in the hospitality sector. The moment Charlotte Evans implemented the systemic reforms and terminations, the Evergreen Grand Lobby erupted in a wave of emotion, guests and staff frozen in place, every glance, every breath, every trembling gesture captured and broadcast through live streams, social media, comments flooding in, hashtags, Evergreen Justice, Hotel While Black, and CEO Power rapidly trending across platforms, amplifying public scrutiny to an overwhelming degree, forcing all remaining staff and management to fully recognize the consequences of their actions. Rebecca Hale trembled. Kevin Scott stood in shock, sweat beading bodies, taut hearts racing, realizing that all prior excuses and defensive behaviors were meaningless, every astonished gaze from guests and live streamers reflecting an undeniable force. Charlotte stood calmly in the center of the lobby, hand firmly on her ID and black credit card. Icy eyes scanning the area, authoritative presence, unmistakable narration, slowing to highlight every trembling, panicked reaction from staff, then accelerating as she opened her files, spreading each legal document and employee report across the counter. Light reflecting off signatures, seals, and authorization, providing proof of power and timely action. Live streamers and guests recording every moment, comments surging, public pressure spreading throughout the lobby. Every wrongdoing, every bias was exposed. Public scrutiny left the staff completely disoriented, trembling eyes wide with astonishment, bodies taut like strings. Charlotte continued, eyes icy voice, calm yet commanding. All violations would be addressed strictly, all staff and management required to complete comprehensive training on service culture and anti-bias protocols. Participate in the monthly mystery guest program. All irregular reports monitored, directly live streams and phone recordings used as training material, and legal evidence. Public pressure spreading powerfully, narration slowing to emphasize trembling and panic, then immediately accelerating as Charlotte announced new policies. Each step deliberate, yet commanding gaze, sweeping the lobby, preparing to oversee all Evergreen hospitality branches, public scrutiny from guests, live streams, and social media, forming a living oversight mechanism, ensuring all misconduct would be eliminated. Charlotte's intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly. The narration slowed as guests live streamed, commented and shared each detail, then accelerated as Charlotte implemented her reforms, immediate termination of violating staff, suspension of other managers, mandatory comprehensive retraining, all future violations handled strictly, public pressure from live streams, comments and shares surging, the lobby vibrating with each pulse, astonished eyes of guests and live streamers creating undeniable weight, Rebecca and Kevin completely losing control, trembling bodies taut, every defensive act rendered useless. Charlotte silently raised her hand, lifting each legal document and employee file light, reflecting through the crystals, projecting absolute authority. Public scrutiny spreading across the lobby, live streamers and guests recording continuously comments and shares, surging, every defensive gesture of the staff meaningless. The narration slowed to emphasize each terrified detail, then accelerated as Charlotte announced the full overhaul across Evergreen Grand and all branches, comprehensive, mandatory training, periodic evaluations, direct supervision, monthly mystery, guest program, public scrutiny from guests and social media, ensuring all violations were strictly addressed, Live streamers continued recording comments and shares, flooding in a public pressure, overwhelming staff, trembling, panicked bodies, taut hearts, racing eyes wide with astonishment. Charlotte remained calm, icy gaze, authoritative presence, every step perfectly calculated, preparing for the next phase, overseeing all branches, eliminating every wrongdoing and prejudice. Intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, public pressure, spreading live streams, surging comments, flooding guests, sharing, creating a mechanism, ensuring absolute fairness. The narration slowed to emphasize staff trembling, and panic then accelerated as Charlotte executed the next step: immediate termination of directly violating staff, suspension of other managers, mandatory retraining, all future violations, strictly handled public pressure from live streams, comments and shares surging the lobby, pulsing every guest gaze and live stream, contributing to Charlotte's authority. Rebecca and Kevin completely lost control. Trembling eyes, wide bodies, taut every defensive action, futile. Charlotte remained composed, every gesture perfectly calculated, preparing for the full overhaul of Evergreen Grand and oversight of other branches, eliminating all misconduct and prejudice. Her intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, public pressure spreading beyond the hotel social media, a buzz live streams, surging comments, flooding guests, sharing, creating an inescapable mechanism of accountability. Charlotte stood tall, icy gaze, commanding presence, every detail and gesture meticulously noted for the full system overhaul narration, slowing to highlight public pressure and intellectual authority, then immediately accelerating as live streamers and guests continuously shared and commented, the lobby resonating with each pulse. Charlotte's authority and fairness demonstrated vividly, creating a ripple effect across the community, hospitality industry, and social media, becoming a viral story, inspiring all who witnessed that true power does not lie in shouting or false authority, but in intelligence, preparation, observation, recording, and decisive action, opening a new chapter for Evergreen Grand, reinforcing service standards, fairness, and intellectual authority, establishing a model for the entire hospitality industry, where every wrongdoing is exposed and addressed immediately. The light from the crystal chandeliers reflected across every corner of the Evergreen Grand lobby, illuminating the calm yet piercing face of Charlotte Evans. 42 CEO of the multinational hotel group, as she stepped away from the front desk after completing the full personnel overhaul and implementing the new policies. Guests continued live streaming phones, flashing continuously comments and shares, surging public scrutiny, completely transforming the atmosphere in the lobby. Rebecca Hale and Kevin Scott stood, trembling eyes wide with astonishment, bodies taut like strings, sweat-beading hearts racing. Realizing that true power does not lie in shouting or false authority, but in preparation, intelligence, observation, and timely action. Each calm step of Charlotte becoming a living testament to intellectual authority. She raised her phone, recording the final scene in the lobby, capturing every detail from panicked glances, futile excuses, to trembling gestures of the staff, live streamers, and guests continuing to share and comment, creating a domino effect across social media. Hashtags Evergreen Justice, Hotel While Black, and CEO Power trending strongly, every misconduct and bias publicly exposed, exerting pressure across the industry. Charlotte turned her steps, deliberate, icy gaze, sweeping the lobby, authority unmistakable each step, a silent message of true power narration, slowing to highlight every trembling, panicked reaction, every astonished gaze of staff and guests, then accelerating as she moved through the lobby, guests' standing phones, raised live streamers capturing every detail, comments and shares surging by the second public pressure, radiating fully staff, completely losing control. Rebecca, trembling, Kevin, frozen eyes wide, bodies taut, sweat beading, hearts pounding, realizing that all prejudice, errors, and excuses were meaningless. Charlotte remained composed, hand firmly on the files and credit card, eyes piercing, preparing for the next phase, overseeing all Evergreen hospitality branches, public scrutiny from guests and social media, ensuring every wrongful act would be eliminated, her intellectual authority and fairness demonstrated vividly. The narration slowed as she observed each reaction, each trembling glance, each nervous gesture of the staff, then accelerated as Charlotte activated her phone to record everything, every detail, from astonished guest eyes, every flustered word of Rebecca and Kevin, live stream, surging comments, flooding public pressure, intensifying the lobby, resonating with each pulse, every defensive act of staff rendered meaningless. Charlotte stepped closer to the counter, gently lifting each employee file and legal document, light reflecting through the crystals, highlighting absolute authority and jurisdiction, all eyes fixed on her, each detail recorded, for implementing a full system overhaul and supervising other branches. Guests and live streamers continued filming, commenting, sharing the immense public pressure. Spreading every wrongdoing and bias eliminated Charlotte Evans' intellectual authority, and fairness demonstrated vividly. The Evergreen Grand Lobby transformed into a symbol of new standards, where every discriminatory act was exposed, every error addressed strictly. The narration slowed to emphasize the staff's trembling panic and astonishment, then accelerated as Charlotte announced the final policies. All employees and managers must complete comprehensive training on unconscious bias. Participate in the monthly mystery guest program. Be directly supervised by the CEO. All violations recorded, live streams and guests recording and commenting, continuously public pressure, spreading beyond Evergreen Grand, the entire hospitality industry, recognizing the change. Rebecca and Kevin completely lost control, trembling eyes wide, every excuse and defensive act, meaningless hearts, racing sweat-beading eyes, panicked. Charlotte remained calm, each step, deliberate icy gaze, authoritative presence, every detail recorded, to oversee all branches, every wrongful act and prejudice eliminated her intellectual authority, and fairness demonstrated vividly. The narration slowed to emphasize public pressure and intellectual authority, then accelerated as Charlotte stepped out of the lobby, guests standing phones, raised live streamers, updating every detail, comments flooding public pressure, spreading across social media, the hospitality industry, and the community. The viral story inspiring all who witnessed that true power does not rely on shouting or false authority, but on intelligence, preparation, observation, recording, and decisive action. The Evergreen Grand became a symbol of intellectual authority, fairness, and systemic change, establishing new standards for the entire industry. Every wrongful act exposed and addressed, immediately opening a new chapter. The story spreading, inspiring, and demonstrating that a single individual with thorough preparation and clear vision can transform an entire system, advance social fairness, and create lasting impact in the hospitality sector. From the perspective of an expert in corporate culture and organizational management, Charlotte Evans' story at the Evergreen Grand is not merely a hotel incident or a viral social media video, but a vivid demonstration of a profound principle. True power does not reside in titles or shouting, but in the ability to observe, assess, and act strategically in situations of tension and injustice. Looking back at the entire event, we see that the front desk staff and hotel managers in the moment they attempted to impose bias were fully exposed by an unforeseen public pressure. Yet above all, Charlotte demonstrated that real strength comes from preparation, absolute calm, and the intelligent use of the system. She did not yell, did not act violently, did not issue impulsive commands. Instead, she exercised authority rationally, with evidence, strategy, and transparency, transforming a personal experience into systemic change, setting new standards for all branches and the hospitality industry. A deeper analysis highlights an important truth: lasting change does not come from anger or impulsive reactions, but from identifying mistakes, analyzing the entire system, pinpointing weaknesses in processes, implementing planned reforms, measuring effectiveness, and continuously monitoring. This approach not only protects guests and enhances service experience, but also reinforces corporate culture, reduces legal risks, and builds long-term trust and credibility for the brand. Public pressure from social media, direct observation by guests, and recorded live streams are not tools for revenge, but instruments to reinforce values, raise standards, and compel the system to respond accurately, fairly, and transparently. Charlotte Evans used silence, composure, and careful observation to generate power far beyond the temporary authority of the staff, turning injustice into an opportunity to establish new benchmarks where prejudice has no place, customers are fully respected, and unprofessional behavior is strictly addressed. From a strategic management perspective, this is a prime example of how a visionary leader with thorough preparation can transform an entire operational system from internal processes to service culture, creating ripple effects not only within a branch, but across the entire industry, affecting staff, customers, and the community, turning a personal experience into collective standards. In the modern business environment, where social media spreads rapidly, Charlotte demonstrated that meticulous preparation, evidence-based action, detailed observation, and decisive action are the most powerful tools, surpassing any false authority, shouting, or impulsive commands, because they create sustainable, systematic, and widely recognized change. Reflecting on this journey also reminds us that any bias, favoritism, or unprofessional behavior can be exposed and corrected if one possesses patience, intelligence, and the willingness to act according to principles, proving that fairness is not a matter of chance, but the result of strategy planning and careful preparation. Charlotte Evans turned a seemingly negative incident into a decisive victory, establishing new standards for the hospitality industry and inspiring leaders and businesses alike about the importance of combining preparation, intellectual authority, and fairness in management. This is a crucial lesson for anyone seeking change. Do not react emotionally. Do not leave situations to chance. Observe, prepare, gather evidence, act strategically, and turn every difficult moment into an opportunity to elevate standards. Most importantly, true power does not lie in shouting or titles, but in the ability to create lasting impact, influencing the entire system, so that every action and decision reflects fairness and human values. If this story inspires you, like the video, to spread the value of fairness, subscribe to avoid missing real dramatic stories of power, justice, and moments that change systems. Comment with the phrase "stand up" to remind each other that sometimes It only takes one person, patient, intelligent, and principled, to transform an entire system, create long-lasting impact, and inspire everyone around them, proving that fairness, standards, and intellectual authority can always overcome prejudice, and that carefully prepared strategic actions leave a timeless effect, not only within a company, but also across the community and the entire industry.